I kept trying to fix it. 5 years is a long time to work on a problem that does not have the solution you think it has. It does not feel like 5 years while you are in it. It feels like a series of discrete attempts, each one beginning fresh, each one carrying the reasonable expectation that this time the adjustment will be sufficient. The 5 years reveal themselves only in retrospect, when you lay the attempts side by side and see the pattern they describe. The relationship was with Sam. We had known each other for 3 years before we got together, which meant we came to it with a history and a mutual understanding that felt, at the time, like a solid foundation. In some ways it was. We knew each other's rhythms, trusted each other's basic intentions, had a genuine and long-developed affection that did not depend on the performance of early courtship. What we did not know was how we would function under the specific pressures of a shared life. And what emerged, with some regularity, was a pattern of disconnection followed by conflict followed by repair followed by a period of relative stability followed by disconnection again. Each cycle was not identical. The content varied. The structure did not. I became, over time, an expert in the repair phase. This is where the fixing instinct operated. I learned what conversations produced reconnection. I learned which approaches to a difficult topic opened things up and which closed them down. I became skilled at identifying the moment when the cycle was entering its disconnection phase and intervening early, before the conflict escalated. I developed a repertoire of strategies that worked, not permanently, but for long enough to restore equilibrium, and then long enough again the next time. I told myself this was what mature partnership required. That all relationships had cycles and that the skill was in navigating them. Both of these things were true, as far as they went. What they did not address was the question I was not asking: why was the cycle recurring at all? Not what to do when it appeared, but what was producing it in the first place. I did not ask that question for a long time. Not because I was incurious. Because asking it required a different kind of honesty than the kind involved in fixing. Fixing is active and skilled and productive feeling. It keeps you moving. The question I was avoiding was still, it required sitting with something uncomfortable without immediately resolving it. The question was this: is this a situational problem that better management can solve, or is this a structural problem that management is merely delaying? Situational problems have solutions. You can identify the variable that is causing the issue, you can adjust the variable, and the issue resolves. The skill of repair works well on situational problems. Structural problems have a different logic. They recur not because the right approach has not yet been found, but because the source of the recurrence is built into the structure itself. No intervention at the level of repair addresses the structure. It only modifies the surface temporarily, until the structure reasserts. What I came to understand, slowly, over years, and through the particular exhaustion of a person who has applied their best efforts repeatedly to no permanent effect, was that Sam and I had a structural incompatibility in how we processed emotional difficulty. Not a character flaw in either of us. A genuine difference in how our nervous systems operated under stress, in what we needed when things were hard, in how we moved through conflict toward resolution. These differences were not minor. They were foundational. Every approach I had developed was an approach to managing the surface expression of that foundational difference. It worked, every time, for a while. And then the difference reasserted, because the difference was still there, unchanged by any surface-level intervention. The fixing was genuine. The effort was real. The love underneath it was not in question. But the diagnosis was wrong, and a generous effort applied to the wrong diagnosis is not a solution. It is a delay. The delay cost 5 years. Not 5 years of misery, there were long stretches of genuine happiness, genuine connection, real warmth. But 5 years of ambient expenditure. 5 years of a significant portion of my emotional and cognitive resources being occupied by the management project, the cycle navigation, the calibration of approach. What would I have done with those resources otherwise? I don't know precisely. But I know they would have been available for something. The conversation that ended it was not dramatic. It was the quietest conversation we had ever had about the state of things. We had both arrived, separately and at roughly the same time, at the same understanding. We had been trying to fix something that was not fixable at the level at which we were working. Neither of us said it angrily. We said it with the particular fatigue of two people who have genuinely tried. The impulse to fix comes from something good. It comes from investment, from care, from the refusal to give up on something that matters. I do not want to argue against that impulse. I want to argue for pairing it with a better diagnostic practice. Before the fixing, what is actually broken? Not what is currently expressing itself as the problem, but what is generating the problem. Is this situational? Is there a specific variable I can address? Or is this structural? Is the recurrence telling me something about the underlying design that no surface intervention will change? The repair toolkit is useful. But the moment it becomes a chronic maintenance practice, the moment you realize you are not solving but cycling, that is the moment to stop and ask the harder question. I kept asking the easier question. For 5 years, I kept finding more sophisticated answers to it. The easier question was, how do I make this better right now? The harder question was, why does it keep needing to be made better? That question had an answer. I was just not ready to hear it for a long time. When I finally heard it, what changed was not that the difficulty disappeared. The ending of the relationship was its own difficulty. But it was a finite one. It had a beginning and a duration and an end. The cycle, by contrast, had been ongoing. In one specific and concrete way, the finite difficulty of the ending was more workable than the indefinite continuation of the maintenance project. You can move through a finite thing. You cannot arrive anywhere if you are always managing the approach. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable, it builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.